Coming up on the Irresistible Church Network.
You know, we talk about how people can listen to a sermon on their way to church and listen to a sermon on their way home from church. But we also need to ask ourselves, why do people have to show up in this room? What can we give them that they can't get anywhere else, that they can't get online? How can we elevate community? How can we elevate worship? How can we elevate prayer?
Hi, I'm Julian Crevier from the Irresistible Church Network, and today I'm here with Jeremy Cole. Jeremy, how you doing?
Hey, Julian, great to see you. As always, I know I'm a big fan of the Irresistible Church Network and what you guys are doing, how you're making churches better, you're making pastors better, not just in the United States, but really all over the world. So thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you. Yeah. So if you're new, the Irresistible Church Network is a network of churches who have a vision to help create irresistible churches in every community of the world. Irresistible not because we are, but the idea being, hey, if the body of Christ, we as the local church, could reflect corporately who Jesus embodied individually, reflect his purpose and his personality, his purpose to seek and save that which was lost, and his personality, that those who are nothing like Jesus actually liked Jesus. He liked them back. So what if our churches could be like that we could have a church like that in every community of the world? And so today, as we're talking to Jim, we're going to be talking about that idea a little bit specifically in different contexts and cultures. So one of the frameworks that we often talk about in ministry is principles, practices, and preferences. A principle goes across context and culture. A practice is how do you as leaders apply it uniquely in your context and culture. And then the preference is usually what we argue the most about. It's our opinions, the color on the walls, the type of music. And so sometimes we as leaders, will basically hold on and kind of be willing to die on hills that are preferences versus the principles. So as we talk about our conversation today, and really anytime you get content, your role as a leader is to kind of filter down and say, what's the principle that I can basically apply uniquely in my context and culture? So I know we've known each other for a while now over the years, and it's just been great to hear what God's been doing in your time in Dubai. And so I really wanted to invite you today to share some of the story. You guys have gone from a church of 50 to 300, and even with 300 attending, you have like 21,000 followers in social media. So I know God's been doing something great over there in Dubai. I'd love for you to tell us more about it.
Yeah, well, thanks for that opportunity. It's been fun, but it hasn't always been fun. I got to be honest. I had some rough first few years, but I think what I'm most excited about over the past 3 years, we've been experimenting with our Sunday services and trying to find, a better way of doing church. Andy talks about this. A uniquely better way of doing church. It's still church, but it's just a better way. And so we've kind of been experimenting, trying to find that. But, it's kind of like going to Buckhead Church. I went there for probably, like 20 years ago. But I would go there, and every single Sunday I would show up and I'd be like, what are they going to do today? It was fun. It was exciting. It was new. And that's kind of how I think we've been experiencing a little bit here at Mosaic. People are excited. And for the people that are watching this today, that's what I want for you. I want people to show up to your churches excited to experience Jesus in a way that they have never experienced him before, that you're your first time guests, they come back again, and people are growing in their faith with Jesus. So I'm looking forward to sharing what we've been learning here.
Well, that's great. And before we kind of jump into that, I think I'd love for people to get to know a little bit more about who you are. So they can get some context for, how you and your family went to Dubai, and like, have you even always been a pastor? So can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, definitely. I can tell you I've not been a pastor before. That was not part of my plan. I always wanted to be a pilot, but I did grow up a pastor's kid, a missionary kid. I grew up the churches that I went to. I went on a Sunday morning, a Sunday evening, Wednesday night, always in the church. Really, my church growing up was a list of things you don't do to be closer to God. But I didn't want to be a pastor. I wanted to be a pilot. And so that's what I went and did. I worked for the regional airlines there in the United States. That's how I came to Atlanta and got to know North Point. Eventually, I built up enough experience to get on with a bigger airline. So at the time, it was JetBlue, Southwest, and Emirates that were hiring. And so I went and interviewed at all three of those, and I did something smart. I actually went and hired an interview coach that taught me how to answer interview questions, and ultimately I got yeses from all three. So I told JetBlue no, Southwest said, come back in a year for your class date. And Emirates said, come back in 3 weeks. And so I went to Emirates and was like, if I don't like it, I can always come back and go to Southwest. But the first 2 years of Emirates was amazing. I remember the very first month I went to Cape Town, South Africa. Then I went to Bangkok, Thailand, Sydney, Australia, all within the first month. Cities that I'd never been to, but really continents that I'd never been to before. So it was just an amazing experience. I was flying around first class everywhere, getting to see the world. I became a captain at 37 years old, flying the 777, which is the airplane that I flew. I got to land it in like 62 different countries. So amazing career, really living just honestly the good life. One of the funny things I like to say to shock people is I tell them that I've been naked on an airplane and they'll spit out your drink, but it's not what you think. In first class on the Emirates A380, they have showers. And so I took a shower in the sky, which, just a great experience. Eventually I met my wife on an overnight in Singapore. About a year later, we got married. We started traveling the world and, life was just great. We had a son a few years after that. And when we were pregnant with our second kid, I feel like God was kind of nudging me towards giving that up to be a pastor. And so I remember going and telling my wife that I feel like God was telling me to quit, this really high paying, great job to be a pastor where I had to go raise my own support. And she was like, I don't know what you ate, but that's not God. But eventually God told her as well. And I quit and started fundraising and came back and really started learning how to be a pastor, because pilots, it's very different from being a pastor. So I had to learn so much, made so many mistakes. But when God wants something to happen, it happens. So it's been challenging but good at the same time.
So now you're pastoring. Well, I guess you've been pastoring before. We'll get more to that conversation. But so as you guys were leading this church in Dubai, you're over there, and you started experimenting with your services, So where did that come on? Have you always been an innovator? Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, definitely. Pilots are not innovators. We stick to checklists and you do the same thing over and over again. You get the same result. You land safely. Everyone gets off the aircraft and the aircraft is usable again, right? So definitely not an innovator. But what happened was, while I was living here, I was on a visit visa. So as an American citizen, you get 30 days of a visit visa. And then after that, you have to exit the country, come back in, and you get another 30 days. And so every month I was driving to the neighboring country, Oman. It's about an hour and a half drive. And so I like to be, efficient with my time. I use that to really spend time with God, to learn. I would listen to a book. I'd listen to a podcast. And so on this particular trip, I was driving there. And in that book I was listening to, there was a story of a principal. He was up in Detroit, Michigan. This is 20, 30 years ago. Detroit was going through a really hard time. The automotive industry was going down. And parents were out working, 2-3 jobs. So the kids, they'd go to school, but they weren't going home and doing their homework. And this guy's school is in the bottom 6% of all the schools in Detroit. And he's like, I'm going to lose my job. And he's desperate. So besides being a principal, he was also a kid's baseball coach. And so what he did for his baseball team is he created a series of YouTube videos that taught really the fundamentals of how to play baseball. And then when it came time for practice, he'd tell the kids, okay, guys, go and watch videos 3, 4, and 5. And whenever you show up into practice today, we're going to put what you learned online, we're going to put it into practice here. So his team, it started getting better. They started winning games. And he started thinking to himself, again, because he's a desperate, he's going to lose his job. He's like, well, if that worked for my baseball team, maybe that would work for my school. And so he had a few of his teachers teach their lessons online. Kids would watch it at home on the bus ride into school. And then when they showed up into the classroom, they did their homework inside of the classroom. Essentially, he flipped the model. 6 months after he started doing this, the kids in that flip model of school they did a test, and they scored higher than the gifted and talented in that same school. This guy's name is Greg Green. He was one of the early pioneers of online learning. And as I'm listening to this story, I'm thinking about being a pastor and kind of how I'm a little bit frustrated because, maybe maybe some of the other pastors here have felt this, maybe what we call it is holy discontent. Like, it's not going the way I expected it to be. I quit this really high paying job to be a pastor, and it's just not working out exactly how I thought it would happen. And, I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking about the story that I just heard, and I'm thinking about the internet, how it's just changed our lives. We're having this call online, right? You're in Atlanta, I'm in Dubai, yet we're able to do this. One of the things I love about living here is I can order all my groceries online, get it delivered. Even pharmacies, I can get my prescriptions filled and delivered to my house, and it costs $2 to have it delivered, and I don't have to tip the guy. So, it's an amazing, online is just an amazing thing. The internet is an amazing thing. And when I think about how it's changed this world, it really hasn't changed the church very much. And so as I began thinking about, this flip model, this kind of rethinking thing, I began to think about, what are the online experiences that I'm having? What are the in-person experiences that I'm having? And I began to believe that in-person events and online experiences are just created differently. A great way of saying that is I love Messi. I love like football. And so I'd love to go to Miami's stadium and cheer him on and, be with 50,000 other people and, get my drink and my popcorn. And, that's going to take a long time. It's going to take like 3 hours out of my life, but, it's an experience. You get to feel it when you're in the crowd. But when I watch it at home online, I don't want to watch a 3-hour version of it. I want to watch the 10-minute highlight video, right? It's because in-person experiences or events are created differently than online experiences. And so I began thinking about that. I feel like online is just naturally better at reach. I'm in Dubai, you're in Atlanta. I could put my sermon online. You guys can put your sermons online, and you can reach Dubai, you can reach India, Australia, the whole entire world. I believe online is better at content delivery. So we could listen to the best preachers in the world. I can go and listen to their sermons, take notes, pause it, go to the restroom, come back, rewind it if I didn't understand anything, watch it 2 or 3 times. I can send it to someone else. Content delivery is just better. It's better done online. And then I feel like convenience, 24/7, 7 days a week. That's just how the internet is made. And so it just makes my life better. It makes it faster, helps me save money. But when I think about in-person services, there's things that it does better than online. For example, community. When we're together in a room, and it creates a feeling when you're in the room, when you're with other people who believe similar things and you're doing life together, you're truly caring for each other. That's better done in person than it is maybe than an online group. I feel like worship is better done in person. Again, it creates a feeling when you're in a room together with a group of people singing together. And I feel like prayer is done better in person. So like if someone comes up to me and puts their hand on my shoulder, looks me in the eye and prays with me, that feels better than getting a text saying, "Hey, I'm praying for you." So as I'm thinking through these things, it's like, okay, well, if in person's better at this and online's better at that, well, why don't we design our services the way that they're just naturally made? And so that was kind of the foundation behind how we've been experimenting.
Were there changes or trends in culture and in ministry that also you've been watching and seeing that kind of also were impetus for your desire to make changes?
Definitely. I think there are many things that I could say here that have affected me, but I think that there's one overarching theme to everything. It would be this, that attraction has shifted. What was working well 20 years ago just isn't working as well today. Maybe another way of saying saying this is that appeal has evolved over time. What a Gen Z wants, what is important to a Gen Z is not really as important to me as a Gen X. And I think we can go into that a little bit more, but, I believe attraction has shifted. That's the overall theme. But when I talk about some individual things, and what I think that all generations want, not just Gen Z, Gen X, all generations want this. We want this, it's a desire for authenticity. We want church to be real. We don't want a fake relationship with Jesus. We just want a real, authentic experience. And I think that's probably driven largely by the fakeness of social media. I was recently at the Crayola experience in Dallas, Texas, and I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's like a Crayola box has exploded all over the room. It's really fun, especially for smaller kids. Like my kids are like jumping in the ball pit and throwing balls at each other, but they're just having a great time. And while we're experiencing this, I looked off to my right and I saw this teenage girl, probably 16 to 18, and she's dressed, in this perfect little outfit. She had the perfect hair, perfect makeup. She looked really cute. And it was her and her mom. And her mom was taking pictures of her posing in different parts of the Crayola experience. But the truth was, and I'm sure if we were to go and look at these photos afterwards, we would say, oh, she's having a great time at the Crayola experience. But the truth is she wasn't. She was faking it. She was just going around the room and posing and trying to look like she's having a good time. And, people are showing up to our churches and they can tell if we're faking it or not. And I think we're probably all a little bit guilty of this. We sing about God's amazing grace and amazing love. We sing about his reckless love, but on the outside, it kind of looks like sometimes we're dead. It seems like we don't really feel it. But people can tell if we're faking it or not, if we're pretending. So I think there's this general desire for authenticity in a church environment. I got a few thoughts around authenticity. I think it's naturally done in smaller settings. So as mega churches or really big churches, we have to find ways to create smaller environments. I recently heard of a mega church. They did their normal sermon, and then afterwards they said, find 2 people around you and just pray together with them. And I thought that's a really easy, simple way to create smaller environments. I kind of personally, I like the idea of like creating a Friday evening service, target like young adults, maybe those parents with kids that travel a lot. And, a Friday evening service, to think that, as an adult, I don't know that I've had 2 days off on a weekend in my entire life. So to think I can go to church on a Friday night and have 2 days off on the weekend, that's pretty appealing for me. So create some events, some environments where a smaller amount of people can come to, because it creates authenticity. Now, if you're a small church pastor, authenticity is your superpower, right? Use it as much as possible, right? When someone comes for the very first time, memorize their name, right? Memorize the conversations that you had with them. And then the next week, if they show up again, call them by their name, ask a follow-up question to the question that you asked them the first time. And that will just make them feel like, wow, these guys care for me. These guys love me. They remembered me, because everybody wants to be known, right? That this is just a natural instinct that we all have. And so if you're a small church, authenticity is your superpower. So go and use it as much as possible. The second thing that I have been, if I look in a trend, one of the things I've been thinking through lately is that people are showing up to our churches for the very first time more bought in to what we're doing than maybe they've been in the past. So for example, if I move back to the US and I move into your city, I'm going to look you up on social media. I'm going to probably watch an Instagram reel video of, minute and a half of your sermon. If I really like it, I'm going to watch your 35-minute sermon. If I'm really bought in, I'm going to go to your website and see, what you have for my kids. And if I'm really, really bought in, I'm going to look at what you believe. And, by the time someone comes to your church for the very first time, they've already been on a coffee date with you. They're just showing up to see if it's worth taking it to the next level. And so, as attractional churches, which I would say Mosaic is an attractional church, we really care about, we ask this question, what would a non-Christian feel when they walk into the room, right? North Point has the foyer, living room, kitchen environments. The foyer is the Sunday morning service. It's designed with a guest in mind. And so when we ask this question of, how would this make a non-Christian feel? I think we need to think through that with this lens, knowing that people are already showing up a little bit bought in to what we're doing. And how should we adjust that based on that new idea of how the internet has allowed this to happen? I'm kind of cautious to say this, but maybe we can be a little bit more churchy. Maybe we can go raise our hands from our waist, maybe up to our shoulders, and let them experience Jesus like that. But I think there's some things that we need to rethink when it comes to first-time guests as well. The last thing or last trend that I would say that I've been seeing is conversations around and about Gen Z. Like I said earlier, what Gen Z thinks is important to them as a Gen X is really just not as important to me. You see, but if we really care about the future of the church, we have to understand what is important to the younger generations, to Gen Z. And luckily, there's a lot of data out there, so we don't need to guess. The information is out there. What is important to them? Barna recently did a study where they went and they interviewed 24,000 teenagers from around the world and asked them questions about God, asked them questions about the church, about evangelism, and we have some really great data that came from that. But before I get into that, let me define the generations just to make sure that we're all on the same page. So the first is this, Gen X. In 2024, you're 44 to 59. You're born in 1965 to 1980. Your leadership style is coordinating. So that's kind of me. That's my age. Millennials, you're 28 to 43. You're born in 1981 to 1996. Your leadership style is collaborative. That's who I identify more with. That's who I want to be in, even though I'm not age-wise. And then there's Gen Z. You're 12 to 27, again, in 2024. You're born in 1997 to 2012. Your leadership style is democratic. You care about what other people think and what they say. So these are teenagers. These are college-age students. These are young adults, maybe even young adults married, and if maybe the very beginnings of young adults with children is Gen Z. But here's what they found out. If you look at the bottom line of all of Barna's research, it's this, that Gen Z is the open generation. And this is really good news for the church. It means that they're open to Christianity. They're open to exploring relationships with Jesus. Barna asked them some questions, these teenagers, on evangelism. And what is the best way to reach them? Because I think that's a question that we need to ask ourselves. If we're going to reach Gen Z, we already know what they want. So how do we actually do it? So I'm going to read some of the things that Gen Z said about themselves and what is important to them. So here's what they said. They want judgment-free listening. Non-Christian Gen Z are most likely to say that they would be interested in learning about Christianity if Christians were less judgmental of things like their personal beliefs or lifestyle. Time and time again, we see this generation valuing listening as an important part of evangelism. You see, Gen Z is more into conversation over lectures. Second thing they said, mutual understanding. The majority of teens feel that the best outcome of faith conversations is gaining a better understanding of each other's point of view. Amicable understanding and care is a crucial step. You see, they care about not only how we do it, but actually the intentions behind it as well. Also is very, very important. I recently attended the Alpha conference in the UK. If you don't know anything about Alpha, it is, it's kind of like Christianity 101. It's like starting point from North Point. And while I was there, it's in this big room, hundreds of people there, people from all over the world. And I asked the leader of Alpha Youth a question. I said, if you could design a church for Gen Z, let's say that you removed everything that you've learned about this is how church is supposed to be, and you designed a church for Gen Z, what would you do? So he thought about it for a little bit, and he said, what I would do is I would gather everyone into a room, and I would say, hey, if you're interested in talking about anxiety, like you've been going through a really hard time in your life and you're just anxious all the time, and you want to know what God thinks about anxiety, I want you to go over here in this part of the room, and we're going to talk about God and anxiety. Then he said, if you're here today, and maybe you grew up without parents or a mom or a dad, and you feel like you haven't been loved, or you want to know what it feels like or what God says about love, okay, why don't you to come over here in this section of the room, and we're going to talk about God and what he thinks about love. Or maybe you're here today and you're struggling with forgiveness. This person did something really bad to you, and you're like, I don't know if I can ever forgive him. And you want to know what God thinks about forgiveness and how it makes our life better? Come over here in this part of the room, and we're going to talk about God and forgiveness. And so that's how he answered the question. And, it's important to hear that, but it's also important to hear what he didn't say as well. He didn't say, we're going to show up in this room, you're going to sit in rows, and you're going to hear someone lecture or inspire us for the next 30, 45 minutes. So I think that's important to hear as well.
Wow, that's super interesting. I've got, I'm obviously one of those groups, and I've got daughters along that spectrum. So it's pretty wild to hear that, and I can appreciate just the wisdom behind understanding that. So as you guys are thinking about your church and leveraging some of these ideas, how has that implemented your services practically to address these trends that it sounds like resulted in growth actually too? I'd love to hear what are some ideas that you guys actually did to address it.
Yeah, well, I would say the growth wasn't based solely on the model or the way that we did church. We have a really great culture at Mosaic. One of our values we say is everyone matters. And so I'll be up on the stage and I will tell people, look, I don't care where you're from, how much money you make, what job you have, what color of your skin is, you matter to us. And so I'm saying that verbally from the stage, but what our model does is our model gives additional ways for us to express that. We also, we don't let a first time guest come and be by themselves and stand over in the corner. Like we actively approach them. We actively go and engage with them and just show them that we really care. And so our model has definitely helped us grow. And I believe if you do some of the things that we're doing, your church is going to grow. But it's our culture that has, I think, been the biggest catalyst. So I want to start by acknowledging that. But I can say, if you do church the way that we've been doing it, we've experienced some things, and I think you will experience this as well. The first, it elevates community in your church. People feel cared for, people feel loved, people get to know each other, know what's going on in their lives. So the first thing it does for you, it elevates your community. The second, it helps stop consumer Christianity because our church is quite engaging, interactive. And so some of the times you just can't sit in a row and listen. So you have to participate. Another thing is it creates easy invitation Sundays. We have a lot of fun at our church. We do a lot of interesting things and people want to come and be a part of that. So it's easy to invite, people to come have church on a boat, right? Another thing, it shows your city that you care for them. This will make sense in a minute, but some of our Sundays, we cancel the church service in the building and we go into the community and we help our community in one way or another. And the last thing is it takes some of the pressure off the main speaker, again, because this is more of an interactive, engaging model. And so you don't have to be up on the stage speaking for 45 minutes at a time, right? You can speak less and give some of that opportunity for other people to say something or be heard or express themselves. So those are, 5 things that I feel like our model does for you as a church leader. But let me share some of we have 7 different ways that we've been experimenting with our church services. I say this a lot, people can listen to a sermon on your drive to church. You could hear a sermon in the church service itself, and then you can drive home and listen to another church service, right? You can get preaching 24/7, 7 days a week from the best preachers in the world. So we try to create experiences where you actually had to show up and into the room to get it. And so essentially we've reduced our sermon time from about 40 minutes to about 20 to 25 minutes. And that 15, 20 minutes that we save, we do something interactive, do something that you had to actually be in the room to get. And so we'll do 20-minute sermon. We'll break up into groups of 6 to 8, and then we'll have discussion questions around what was just spoken about. And this does a couple different things for you. The first is that it allows you to process what you just heard. Because as Christians, one of our problems is we have information overload. We've got all the information out there, but normally we just don't do anything about it. And so by processing what we just heard, it allows you to maybe take it from your head to your heart, and then maybe from your heart to your hands and your feet. Actually go out and do it. So that helps. That helps churches. That helps pastors. Another thing it does, it allows you to make a friend in the church service itself. As we're sitting around these groups, and I like how one person answers that question. I'll be like, I think me or her will get along outside of church. And, if you think about the current model of church how can you make friends? It's, if you show up early or if you hang out afterwards, or maybe you take a bigger step and you join a group. But this allows for people to make friends inside of the church service. And one of the reasons why people come back to churches is because they have a friend in church. So it really helps with first-time guest retention rates. So that's one service type. Another service type, we do 20-minute sermon, and we'll have breakout prayer groups. So I was recently in Abu Dhabi, and we did this. And there were about 6 people in my group. And 2 of the girls that were there found out that week that their moms had cancer. 2 totally separate people. And so as we were in that group and, we're just sharing what's going on, they're thinking about, is my mom going to live? Like, how long does she have to live? Do I need to move back to my home country to take care of my mom? There's so many questions that are going through their minds. And, as I look back and think about this, and we prayed for them, we finished up. There are lots of tears, obviously, from what's happening. And one of the girls told me afterwards, she's like, Thank you. I needed this today. And I never would have known this unless I had created an opportunity for them to share. If you show up to a normal church service, goodbye, see you next week. You don't have these opportunities to have real conversations. And because we created an opportunity, we were able to significantly make an impact on both these ladies' lives. So that was a really cool story. Another thing that we do 20-minute sermon, and then we'll do testimonies. That is about what we just talked about. So let's say I'm talking about forgiveness, and Joe, he's got to forgive his dad because his dad did this and his upbringing and stuff. And he didn't want to, but, he ended up calling his dad and forgiving his dad. And so when Joe's up there on stage, it's just more real. It's more authentic because Joe's not getting paid, right? Everybody knows Joe. Everybody knows Joe and all his flaws. But when he's up on stage, it's just real. It's authentic. And testimonies allow people to hear that and to be a part of it. So something we did recently was we finished off a 6-week series on the Holy Spirit. And then we invited 3 people up on for week 7. We invited 3 people on the stage, and we just talked about what did you learn through the past 6 weeks of the series of the Holy Spirit. And that went over really well. I mean, it was, again, there was no preaching on that week. It was just stories of how our church made a difference in people's lives. And I think that's important, for your church, for other people to hear how you're making a difference. I think it's important to us as pastors to be able to see that. I remember sitting in the front row, like holding back tears because I was making a difference in these people's lives. And it just made me feel like I was making a difference. And I think pastors, we need more opportunities for that to happen. Another thing we do, the 4th type is called the worship circle. So I've always feel like there's this separation between us down in the audience and the band up on the stage. And so what we decided was, let's bring them off the stage. Let's put them in the center of the room. Let's stand really close to them, right around them, and let's do it together. Let's feel like we're doing this together. So in that particular service, there's no sermon. There's worship, an extended period of worship. There's a time of communion and a time of praying together. And we recently said, while the music's playing and stuff, it's real soft. We said, just find 2 people around you, or find 1 person around you and pray with them now. And it was just an amazing experience for me personally to pray with someone. And I had a guy pray for me. He was like barely a Christian. He's maybe accepted Christ a few weeks ago. And he's like, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I'm going to pray for the pastor. And I was like, wow. I mean, that was just a really cool experience for me. Another thing we do is we take the rows out of the auditorium. We'll put tables and then a few chairs, obviously with the tables. And we call this at the table. Jesus would go from town to town, and he would always either get invited to dinner or he'd invite himself to dinner. And then he'd sit around a table and they would have conversations around himself, around God. And so we do the same thing. We tell people, bring some food from your home country, because we have people from all over the world. We'll put it like on this big buffet table. People will go get some food. We'll have a short teaching, and then we'll have discussion questions for people to eat, and then have conversations with the people who are at their table with them. And so that's really fun because people like to eat. People like to, be with other Christians. And so that's really fun. Two more. One that we do is called pop-up church. So there's always this excitement of taking church outside the building.
Is this the church on the boat experience?
So this is church on the boat. So here in Dubai, they have these big restaurant boats where you can go and they'll serve you a meal and you'll travel around the city. So we go rent one of those, and we will do a time of worship. We'll have some testimonies, and we're just going out and seeing the city. Really, we're elevating community, right? We're building relationships. And so that's an easy invite, right? You want to go for a free boat ride? Yeah, come on. All right. So that's experiencing church. We've also rented a restaurant, and we've had church in a restaurant. So that's been really fun. But that's called pop-up church. And then the last thing that we do, and we don't do it a lot here in Dubai just because of the way the city is, but we call it Serve the City. And that's where we go into the community and we just help the community. Maybe if there's a big race or a big event that the community needs lots of volunteers, well, hey, our church is going to show up and we're going to help you, city. Maybe it's just going and cutting lawns for elderly or for the poor. But we're going out and we're making a difference for the city. And I think that speaks a lot for our cities. If we're coming out and we're actually meeting the needs of the city, they're going to pay attention and they're going to notice and they're going to be like, no, you can't, this church can't shut down. You are making such an impact for the city. And so, that is the last thing that we do. And so we'll put up a slide with all the 7 different service types, but, it's been fun to try church in a different way.
Sounds fun. Yeah, just engaging. I mean, a lot of, for my heart, is investing in, the parents of the activities that my kids are in, or neighbors and friends, and trying to create places to invite them to that creates an opportunity. That sounds really cool. All those sound super creative. So, and fun, but I'm sure as you learned along the way, lots of different things. Some were probably great ideas. Some were success. Some have maybe not been as much. What have you been learning along the way as you guys have been experimenting with how you do church?
Definitely. I mean, that's how life is, right? But what surprised me is when we went and we polled or we asked our members, which one of these is your favorite ones? There wasn't a clear winner, which I was shocked because I have my favorite, right? And I think that's the best one. That's what everyone's going to choose. But when we did it, it was all over the place. I remember this one girl, her name is Jackie. She's an American and she's an introvert. And she told me the story that every time we say, hey, we're going to break up into a group, find 6 to 8 people around you, she gets this knot in her throat, right? And she's like, oh no, I'm going to have to talk to people I don't know.
Yeah, if you're an introvert, that could be a scary moment, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so, but she does it and she tells me afterward, that was really good. And when I asked her this question, which one of these 7 different types of church service is your favorite? Guess what she said? She said the discussion groups. Like the one that she's most scared of, the one where she gets the knot in her throat. She said that is her favorite, and she's an introvert. And so I was shocked, to learn something about that. But let me tell you, there are some things that we learned over time, and I think this will happen for you if you try some of these. You're going to experience this as well. The first is that your community is going to grow closer together. Like people are going to truly care for each other. They're going to hang out more. The service is going to end and people aren't leaving, right? The service ends and people are hanging out for 30, 40 minutes before they leave because it's their community, right? It's their community time. And so people are going to hang out after your services more because they've built more community. Our first time guest retention rate was great. It was incredible. And I think this would happen for your church. The average first time guest retention rate in the United States is 8 to 12%. And for our first 2 years, we were getting a 30% first time guest retention rate. And so, like I said, relationships make people stay. And, so I believe your church will experience growth if you implement some of these ideas. We noticed there was a lot of excitement about change. It was fun. People are showing up like, what are they going to do today? I can't believe they did that at church. We get that a lot. But what I did see after about 2.5 years, the excitement started to dwindle a little bit. interactive sessions, they tend to drain people a little bit more. It requires energy to do them. You just can't sit in a row. It kind of does stop consumer Christianity. You just can't sit there and consume. And so it did stretch people. It did require energy. And what I've learned is I think there needs to be a balance between these interactive sessions and some time to just sit there and absorb and just, absorb the message. And so I was recently at my friend's church after Christmas, and I was in the service, and I asked myself the question, after this sermon is done, am I going to be happy to break out into groups and have discussion questions? And I was like, not really. I'm pretty tired right now. So I was like, I hope they don't do it. And so there needs to be this balance between these interactive sessions and just sitting and being able to absorb and be filled up. Yeah. That's what we've learned over the past 3 years.
That's helpful. Well, I know, as pastors are always wondering, all right, so as I'm thinking about this, and maybe leaders are listening to this right now, there's probably questions that they probably need to be asking about themselves as they're thinking about innovating. Like, hey, they want to inspire people to follow Jesus. And, what are questions they need to be asking of themselves in their organizations as they think about innovating to basically address some of the changes in ministry and culture these days?
Ultimately, I want people to find a uniquely better way of doing church. I want people to experiment and, come up with a way that is more effective. I've been doing church, for years and years the same way. And then Andy came along and he created this different way of doing church, a different way of experiencing Jesus. And, it took off. Look what North Point has become. And I believe that we're seeing a change in culture to where we need to find the next uniquely better way. And so here's 3 questions that I hope will get people thinking about maybe there is a better way. So here's the first one. It's, how can we make our services more authentic and real to meet the evolving desires for authenticity amongst today's congregation? Really, you're asking, how can I make our church services more real, more authentic? If I were to answer this question, I think the easiest way is to get people to pray together. It just feels good, right? It feels like these people truly do care for me and they love me. The second thing I would say is maybe create some smaller environments where people can experience that authenticity, just because it is done better in smaller environments. So that's kind of how I would answer that first question. The second question is this: what elements of our church service can we change to better leverage the strengths of both in-person and online experiences? Again, it's this idea that in-person and online experiences, they're just created differently. So how can we leverage that? We talk about how people can listen to a sermon on their way to church and listen to a sermon on their way home from church. But we also need to ask ourselves, why do people have to show up in this room? What can we give them that they can't get anywhere else, that they can't get online? How can we elevate community? How can we elevate worship? How can we elevate prayer? So those are some of the things that I would be asking. The last question is what strategies can we implement to engage and attract younger generations, particularly Gen Z, in our church activities? I would invite every church leader to sit down with a Gen Z in their church and just ask them the same question I asked the Alpha Youth leader. If you could throw out all you know about church and you created a church for Gen Z, what would you do? Maybe they will come up with a uniquely better way of doing church. I'd create some opportunities for people to express themselves because everybody wants to be heard. Everybody wants to be known. And I think that Gen Z, for them, that's really important. So that's what I would do.
As leaders are listening and they're thinking about ideas, which sounds like a lot of these could lead to changes as they start answering them. So that's pretty exciting for a lot of leaders as they think about change, and then probably scary because they know the impact of change impacts, people's expectations and their experience. And so as they're thinking about potential changes, what do they need to make sure they're considering in the process as you think about change?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is they got to acknowledge that it's scary. Change is scary. It might get worse before it gets better. Some people may leave, some people may stop giving and coming. I think these are all normal thoughts, and I think we just need to acknowledge first off that those concerns are real, and we just need to accept that. But I did learn something recently from the ex-CEO of 7-Eleven. I don't know him. I just saw him on TikTok. But he said this about change, and I thought it was so good. He says there's 3 keys to change. The first is this, is that CEO stands for change equals opportunity. And I think this is just true in life, that whenever there is a change, there are endless possibilities of what could happen. And I would say if you're one of the first to, put in the effort to sow, you're going to be the first to reap the greatest rewards. And so I think there is some opportunities for churches out there as they maybe experiment with the church of the future, that maybe they're going to find something and their church is going to experience explosive growth because there is opportunities and change. So CEO, change equals opportunity. The second thing he said is the key to change is confidence, that you need to have confidence. But how do you have confidence when you're doing something that's never been done before? Well, the key to confidence in that scenario is preparation. The more you prepare for something, the more you think through, what are the pitfalls, what are the advantages or disadvantages. The more you prepare, the greater confidence you're going to have and the greater chance that you're going to succeed in whatever you're doing. And then the last key to change that he said is clarity. We got to keep things simple. Andy says this, that if it's a mist in the pulpit, it's a fog in the pew. And I think this applies to vision casting as well. If you don't know where you're headed, you don't know where you're trying to take someone from, point A to point B. If it's not clear, if it's not simple for them to understand, if you're not able to take it and transfer it to someone else simply, it's just, you're going to have a harder time. So the 3 keys to change: CEO, change equals confidence, or change equals opportunity, confidence, and clarity. Those are the 3 keys to change if you're going to do some of these ideas.
That's super helpful. I've heard leaders talk about how they like change. And I think my version of this is basically everybody likes change when they're the one that creates it, but no one likes it thrust upon them.
Yeah.
So just recognizing that it can be challenging and shocking to organizations. So I think that's super helpful. Thanks for helping us think through that. So my next question is probably, as you talk, there's a lot of ideas and innovation and potential ways they can implement things. But what is one practical, maybe next step that a leader can, who's listening to this can do? It's all right, so I like what you're saying. It's a lot of information, but what's one simple thing I can do to kind of move in this direction practically?
Yeah, I would answer it in 2 different ways. So if you're an existing church leader, I would say take it slow. Go and do one of these things in a month and, get some feedback. And if it's positive, maybe try another thing in a month or 2. But as you're first starting out, you're an existing leader, take it slow. If you're a church planter, just be brave. Just go out and do it. You're probably young. You probably got lots of energy. Go and experiment. And, maybe you will find a uniquely better way of doing church. And so that it is so important, not just for you, but for really the church community at large, that we're able to find that. And so just be brave. Go do it.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Jeremy, so much for being with us and sharing. The Irresistible Church Network is grateful for you spending time. And I know folks might want to get in touch with you. What's the best way people can actually ask questions or follow up with what you're up to?
Well, I appreciate that. It's been my pleasure. And I recently handed over the leadership of my church to my teaching pastor. He's doing an amazing job. The church continues to grow. And so I have a lot of free time, to be honest. And what I feel like what God is calling me to next is being a church innovation coach. And so I would love to go on this journey with you to help you along the way. Maybe, I've had a life coach for the past 7 years, and it's just someone who has done things before me, and I've learned from that. And so I'd love to kind of help you on this journey. You can get in touch with me via my website, churchaftercovid.org. So I created this website years ago, right after COVID. But get in touch with me there. There's a way to send me an email. I'd love to go on this journey with you. But I'd also say check out Mosaic Dubai. That's my church. Look at them on Instagram, on Facebook. The guys are doing amazing things. Sam, my videographer, is standing here behind the cameras. But the team is just they're killing it. And so I'm so proud of them. Go check it out if you want some inspiration about social media in churches. But for me, churchaftercovid.org. And I need some help, honestly. I don't have really very many connections in the church planting world, and I feel like this message needs to go out to the church planting world. And so If you have some connections there, please get in touch with me as well. I'd like to help out. But yeah, churchaftercovid.org.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you again so much for taking time to share. And for you guys who are joining us, we're grateful for you and what you're doing. We know that leading is lonely. And they say heavy is the head that wears the crown. Like there is a burden and a unique challenge to leading a church. And then thinking about innovating and making change is not easy. So I appreciate what all you are doing in your communities to make an impact, to bring Jesus in a practical way, to show the love that he's given to us. And Jeremy, thank you so much for helping us figure out how can we do that in a way that's even more innovative to reach where culture is today. So thank you, everybody, from the Irresistible Church Network, signing off.